Hello everyone, I'm Mistung and today I'd like to talk about 4C Blood. Um, I'd like to show you one of the decks that I played in German Highlander, but I ported that deck for 100 card singleton, and since there was a change in the ban list, you can read about the changes in my previous article. Um, the format changed more towards the German Highlander format, and that is why well, it didn't really change for C Blood, but it changed the whole metagame. I mean, now we have more freedom to build different kind of decks, so we can play, like real blue-white control. Finally, we can play a Baglome, for example, or lands or whatever comes to your mind that wasn't really possible before. Mostly combo decks. For example, now Storm is also a viable choice. Um, for for the last Chainsaw Massacre, I decided to play for Sea Blood because I didn't finish my Baglome deck because I still need Dark Depths that I didn't buy. Anyway, the reason was also because the week before I went to a German Highlander tournament and there were 57 players, I think, and that was, like, that was awesome. It seems like sometimes that the format may seem to others that it's dead, but it's not true. I mean, there are still players, and they like to play. I like to play. One needs to travel a bit and probably live in Europe in order to play. Um, but there are other variants I mean, like Canada has Canadian Highlander. There's one in Australia, and so we have German Highlander here. So I went there with a deck similar to this one. Since their natural order is banned there, so I didn't play. You can see natural order, Practice, Primeval Titan. Those are really expensive cards for the deck. This is actually a rather aggressive deck, so you don't usually have the time to cast these. But when the card was legal, I also used to play that. I just played natural order and Primeval Titan. Instead of track task, I played cards like timely reinforcements, for example, and there is no sideboard in German Highlander, so that's why I was playing Teak and Orb in main deck, for example, and stuff like that. So, what the deck is about? Well, I already told you that it's rather aggressive. The mana curve, okay, I cannot move that, is rather low. The best cards are the 4 drops, that's pretty clear. It's mostly, well, there are planeswalkers, which are really strong, is they stay in play and still do something. Yeah, I'll talk about this a bit later. So, um, this deck features mana dorks. I think you can see that there's quite a lot of them. I've got all those that provide colored mana, so I can play some of my free drops on turn 2. This is something which is really strong. I mean, it wasn't like that in the past, but now that we have more and more multicolored creatures, they are usually very strong. I mean, if you look at Anafenza the Foremost, for example, I mean, she's really crazy. I mean, when she attacks, you just put +1/+1 counter on enter the creature. It doesn't need to attack even. So, I mean, if you have Birds of Paradise in play, and you attack with Anafenza, you just put it on the birds. And she also says that if a non-token creature opponent controls or owns would die, um, well, it goes to the graveyard. I mean, it's exiled instead, and that was pretty important in standard. And this ability is actually pretty nice in Highlander as well. You usually want some cards that help you fight for example, a reanimator or something. Which is not really the case here, but anyway, it's a good ability. I mean, there's nothing, like saying, um, well, there's no disadvantage. And there's a lot of cards like that. I mean, even Loxodon Smiter, when I saw that, I mean, it was like, for 3 mana, 4/4, that's already, pretty strong. And then it can be countered. I mean, wow, that's cool. And if by chance someone would decide to actually let you discard, and you can just put this into play. Well, it doesn't really happen often, but, well, sometimes it does happen. Well, Knight of the Reliquary is actually one of the older cards, let's say, but this one, I mean, we've seen the card almost anywhere. It's a really strong one, and it can fix your mana. You can find any land, put it into play, and it can get big. So there are all stars that I mean, that used to be good, but like, that's Kitchen Things and Knight of the Reliquary. And then we have the new cards here. Um, well, Cruiser of Crufix is a card that some people don't think that it's good, but because they just see the life gain as the good ability. But if you've played Junk Control or Junk Midrange or Aggro in Standard, you'd know that this card is actually I mean, the first ability is actually way better. I mean, both are good, but the fact that you can filter through your library in a mid-range, like matchup, it's really powerful, because that is what decides the games. I mean, this deck, I mean, if you play, like 4-color good stuff, that's the deck that top decks really well. I mean, if you draw a card, it's usually pretty strong one. I have some cards that are, well, won't be really that strong if you don't have anything in play, for example, or are more situational, like for example Azilius Persecution, which is a pet card of mine, kind of. But otherwise, this doesn't really play that many lands, so I mean, you can draw a card and it's usually a bomb. And so that's why Cruiser of Crufix is really good. It has also good body. I mean, it's not a really attacker, but 2/4 can block really well. Terrorist Tracker is also another beast. I mean, like, when I saw this card, I was like, what the hell? I mean, like, are Wizards of the Coast crazy? I mean, green card that allows you to draw cards. I mean, that's insane, and it grows. Reclamation Sage is a card that I used to play with Instinger in the deck at first, because there were Stoneforge Mystics everywhere. You needed to deal with equipments. But later, people started to play more and more of the blue-white or Esper control decks, or Combo control decks, and, well, sometimes you need to get rid of some really, really annoying enchantments. If it's humility, then it's a problem, but, well, this helps. And also it deals with those equipments still. Taliak Heretic Qatar is also a new card, kind of, and I really like that one. I mean, it's a really aggressive one. I mean, you can see it with Vintage in White Eldrazi, and I mean, she's doing really great job, and like, it's a surprise now, seriously. I mean, she attacks, she's got first strike, she can block anything, and creatures and non-basic lands your opponent control enter the battlefield tapped, and this is a very strong ability. I mean, if you play against a multicolor deck like mine, if you play a fetch land, it comes into play tapped, and if you want to fetch with it, you usually need to land, and, well, that also comes into play tapped, so that can win games. I mean, it can give you 1 or 2 turns, and that's huge for this deck. Well, Lingering Souls is a card that I really like, more against also the blue-white control decks, or for example junk decks. this card is good against those decks. Otherwise, it's not really that good. I mean, I could put something else there instead. Even Mind Sensor is also one of the older cards that I used to play almost everywhere because I needed to deal with combos. Well, like Reanimator, for example, Escape Shift and stuff. Yeah. So this is a surprise card. In the one-hit card singleton in the Chainsaw Massacre that we play, it wasn't usually that strong. It wasn't actually good. I was usually siding that out, putting that out. But now it's time to play it again. It's going to be good. So if you can play a free drop on tour 2, then you'll most probably have to play a 2 drop. And there's also a bunch of them. Well, one which is really strong and is Bear Blossom. The first time I saw the card, I was like, wow, I mean, that seems like to win the game, you know, like, and I don't need to do anything. And it's actually true. If you land this card, then you usually win. You could see that if you read my article about 5C aggro. In mid-range, that's the card that was winning games. I mean, it's really strong. I used to play that card against control decks all the time, but if you play a mirror match, for example, and the first person who plays Bitter Blossoms just wins. It's really difficult to get rid of it. I mean, yeah, you can play Zealous Persecution, Abrupt Decay on Blossom, and then you can still win, but it's really difficult. I mean, it's still a 100 card singleton, and drawing the specific cards, is not easy. They're confident, well, greatness at any cost says it all, so, well, draw cards. It usually doesn't doesn't survive till your next upkeep, but still good. Arc Trail, that's also one of the cards that I wasn't playing in Chainsaw Massacre before the banlist, but now I think it should be better once again. Because people will play more efficient decks, most probably. They will soon realize that they will need to be more efficient. And one way to do that is to play many monodorks. And Arctrail deals with them, and it also deals with other stuff. Sometimes you can kill a planeswalker with it. There are a few creatures that just beat. For example, that's well, I can show you. Like there's Sylvan Advocate, which is good. It has vigilance. It's a 2/3, and yeah, it can block some 2/2s and stuff, which sometimes is relevant. For example, against red deck wins, it's actually pretty good. If they start with like a Goblin Guide or Jigglypuff or something like that, then you can even block with that, and it either costs them enter the card or they just do not attack. So that's a pretty good one. Wild Armgrave is also the best anti red deck wins card, but it's good in general. I mean, it's just that's there also to just beat. Another way is Putrid Leech. I used to play Green Flare in the deck since the card was printed, and I really like the card, and I like the effect. Well, anything that does something with your library is something I like. But unfortunately, in German Highlander, the card wasn't really performing that well. And I also, for example, I bored out Sylvan Library quite a lot, and I was doing the same with Green Flare. So the card is really good against control. If you play against the blue-white based control decks, the card is stellar. If you play it and it sticks, then you'll win, eventually win. Unfortunately, against creature decks that I was running into most of the time, against the players that play Chainsaw Massacre, it wasn't really that good. So I decided to cut it and put put Lich there instead. That card swings for 4 as well against control decks, so that's good. It won't let you find the card you need, but against creature decks it's actually better. So I put that in. Please my Linen. Well, it's not a Witch Wolf. Well, it's an upgraded Witch Wolf. It has for 5 mana you can make it monstrous, which means to put +1/+1 counter on it, and it gains Hexproof and Indestructible. It doesn't really happen often, but sometimes when it does, it's pretty cool. The new addition is Scrap Heap Scrounger, which is a card. I was looking for a 2-drop that can beat, and which I could cast if possible anytime, so I was actually looking for a card for 2 mana costing 1 green. And I used to play Duskwatch Recruiter, I think, or well, I was just trying to play that if that could work, but it wasn't really good enough for me. But this card's perfect. I mean, it can be a record. It can come back from the graveyard. If you exile the creature, then it comes back to the battlefield. So that's pretty neat. And it cannot block, but I don't usually really want to block with that anyway. I mean, like with the deck. Then there are cards that do something, which is Lotus Cobra, that can, if you read my report from the Chainsaw Massacre 4.02, then you'll see that it can do crazy stuff. I mean, like I played, like you have like 4 mana on turn 2 and stuff like that. So it can be a really swingy, like if you have the fetch land, you can play anything from the deck. Well, maybe not really these, but you can play those Planeswalkers here, for example. So Lotus Cobra is evil, seriously evil. And if you don't know the comic of the same name, like Lotus Cobra is evil, then I recommend to check it out. It's pretty cool. Scavenging Ooze is, well, that's the card you really want to play if you want to fight Reanimator decks or Loam or whatever, and it's also good against control that uses the graveyard. It doesn't matter if it plays like Mystical Teachings or Snapcaster Mage, Torrential Killer Hulk or something like that. You want to get rid of those cards, even Delve cards. Tidal Scholar is, well, it's a 2/2 body, and it has, it's a disruption in a way, so you can steal a card for a while. And there's Quasili Pride Mage, because destroy enchantments and artifacts is really important in this format, and there are very, very strong artifacts and enchantments, so you need, well, at least 2 main deck, and some in the sideboard, if possible, if you can do that. Voice of Resurgence is a good card, and control decks don't like it, and the token can get huge sometimes. So that's about 2-drops as creatures. I've got the Sylvan Library I talked about before, which is pretty good against some decks. But against the decks that you actually need to draw your value cards, this is his card that you should just board out and put something in. In my case, it's usually some creature. The Zealous Persecution is pretty strong in creature combat, and it also deals with cards like True Name Nemesis and stuff. So that is why I keep it there. I usually played Golgari Charm in my sideboard, but I decided to cut that card and just keep Persecution, Zealous Persecution in my main deck. Well, you prep decay, it's pretty cool. I mean, you've got permanent, the lightning helix is good because of the life gain here, and often sometimes when you play against like red deck wins or some other deck that threatens that it would just kill you, you can just lightning helix your opponent so it doesn't go wrong, and that free life actually can win the game. Dramarka's commands kinda also preventing damage from red spells, or well, instant and sorcery, but it's usually red. And it has few other cool things like target player sacrifices an enchantment, which can even be cursor of graphics, or something really annoying like mode. Because your creatures don't usually fly, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature, and also your creature can fight another creature that you don't actually control. Eladomary Skull is one of the best tutors here. I mean, just looks for a creature and puts it in your hand. The most tutored creature in Foresee Blood, in my case, in German Highlander, was Stoneforge Mystic, but the card was banned for quite a long time, and now I'm not really sure even if Stoneforge Mystic is good enough to be reintroduced in the deck. It's really a beating, to play against it, but I'll have to see. Since there's natural order that I can play instead of that, I decided to still keep this package, kind of these three cards there instead of Stoneforge Mystic and Bear Skull. But there are cards that I could cut. For example, I could cut Lingering Souls that I don't really need, and I don't even need Fract Ask. I mean, Bear Skull is a 4/4 lifelink, kind of. So it's about my 2 drops. Well, 4 drops are the most powerful spells in the deck, and well, we'll look at the Planeswalkers. There's Elspeth Knight Errant that I forgot to put in my deck list actually last time. I don't know how, but anyway, this Planeswalker still earns its spot. It gives a creature +3/+3 and free and flying, which can be really relevant to actually get through, and it also creates the creatures. So even if you don't have anything in play, then well, you can just create a soldier and another soldier, and then later just pump it and fly. Gideon Alive Zendikar alone can attack, so that's things. It can also pump your creatures, like end him effect immediately if you sacrifice it, and it also creates 2/2, so that's good. I'm not really sure if this is the best card to have in the deck. I think there might be a better 4-drop instead of Gideon Alive Zendikar, but I used to play this in control decks, in all the control decks I played, and I really liked the card, so I put it in this one as well. But for example, Garruk, Wild Speaker is better, or at least feels to work better with the deck. Well, it can untap 2 target lands, but can be relevant, and it creates 3 freebies, which is good. Sometimes you even get to overrun someone. Well, natural order, well, that's clear. I mean, this card, years ago, in German Highlander, when I was playing, well, I wasn't really playing Foresee Blood, but I was playing 5C aggro, and then I switched to 4C. I used to play that, and I was writing during each event, I was writing down which card actually won the game, and I found out that Natural Order actually wins 10% of the games that I played, and I was really surprised about this. I mean, this card is really strong, and yeah, I know that well, it was the primeval titan that won the game, but I mean, you just cast it on turn 3 and you win, and it's that kind of a free win of this deck. Um, Normally, this deck doesn't have any free wins, but if you play the natural order, if you have it in the deck, you can actually get it. In 100 car singleton, where you have a sideboard, then you can board it out if you play against something that it's not really good. But otherwise, it's still win games just out of nowhere. Um, so that's really huge. Well, it's a strong card, really strong one. Well, Fran is good against control, yes, even though it dies to Breath of God, but otherwise it can be countered. It has Troll Shroud, or well, now Hexproof, and it regenerates, which is good against creature decks as well, so it's really difficult to get rid of it. Saurian Solemn Visitor is a card I like, and I've seen that many people don't actually play that. Many people don't even play Gideon. I like it because it gives lifelink and +1 to your creatures, and I mean it's a really huge swing. Also from the era of Siege Rhino decks, I mean if you played this and attacked with everything you had, I mean it was like over like 20 life swing, and it was really difficult to win the game afterwards. And it also creates a 2/2 flying vampire, which for me is really relevant because I'm not really known for playing creatures, and this deck is full of creatures. So sometimes I really need that evasion, especially if I'm facing that mode. Yeah, right. So it's good. I mean, if I want to play a planeswalker, it either needs to create some creature something I can kill my opponent with, or do something really relevant. The last planeswalker is Ajani Vengeance, which I also really like because it is a unique way how to deal with certain permanents if you can't deal with them otherwise. For example, one of the cards that used to be often annoying for me, for example, was Ethervile and Vidalcan Shackles, and you can just tap that and it won't untap. It can help with other things, and it's pretty good. And sometimes just Helix for 4 mana is good enough. So that's my choice of planeswalkers. There's also Liliana of the Veil, which is really strong. I mean, she's like, if someone would ask me if what is the most powerful planeswalker, I'd have to think about this a little bit because sometimes I feel like the Liliana of the Veil is actually stronger than Chase the Mind Sculptor, but since I cannot really play Liliana in Vintage, I'm like, okay, so maybe it's still Jace. So that's about Planeswalkers, and I've got few creatures there, and since they cost 4 mana, they have to be really good. And so there's Falconrat Aristocrat, so as you can see, I said that I don't really have that much of evasion. I have really good creatures that can attack, do something really mean, and just go through usually. But sometimes when you look at the board, which is like flooded with creatures and stuff, you also need to fly over. And Falconrat Aristocrat was the card I killed many people with, and she was actually like the third card that I actually managed to win the games with after Natural Order. So she earned her place really. It was the second to third the second most tutored card in my deck. If I was casting Legendary Skull or Thematic Tutor, it was usually for Falconrad Aristocrat. So that's this card. Bloodbraid Elf. Well, I mean, what can I say? It's a hasty creature and it cascades into something. And well, I'm an expert at cascading into mana dorks, but often the card advantage is really crazy. So, well, the card stays in still. And Master of the Fells is really nice creature. I mean, for 4 mana, you got a 2/2 and another 2/2, and you gain 2 life. And if you don't play a spell, or your opponent doesn't play a spell during their turn or your turn, well, it flips, or rather transforms. And then you've got Ravager of the Fells, which is for trample. It deals 2 damage to your opponent and then to his creature, to their creature. And well, it's a good card. When I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, I can play this in my Junt. Well, in the end, I didn't really play that because there were other cards that seemed to be better. But in the battle of decks like this, you know, like value versus value, this is the card you want to play. Well, Queen Marquesa or Martesa or whatever. That's also, I mean, when I saw this card, I was like, what the hell? Well, first thing is that the Monarch, what it is, not ability or, well, whatever, it's very strong. And, you know, like, if you have a creature deck, you know, let's say White Eldrazi playing plus Jailer, you draw a card, you know, like 2 cards per turn. That's huge. And this card also, it has Death Touch, so it can just kill anything. It has haste, so it can also kill something, you know, like a Planeswalker. And she also, if by chance your opponent would become the Monarch because it, well, hit you back, they hit you back. She creates a 1/1 black assassin creature token that also has Death Touch and haste. So, you know, like, okay, you're probably getting that 1 damage through, or your opponent will have to think about it if they want to give you that card or not. And I find that really good. I mean, it just seems to be crazy. Unfortunately, I'm not really used to that card yet, at least in paper, because on Magic Online it will just do everything for you, but in paper I manage to miss all my triggers all the time, so not good. Well, Siege Rhino, you know, they usually come in packs or crash. Unfortunately not in this deck. You can play only one, but when you do, it's really good. Well, I mean, it's still really good. It's big, it has trample, it just drains life. I mean, does everything. And Saskia. Okay, I left that for the last card to talk about. When I saw that for the first time in my life, which was actually relatively, well, not so long time ago, because I saw that in Finland. It's like 2 months ago or something. I asked my opponent to if I can read the card because I didn't know what it was, and I read it and I was like, okay, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. I was like, really? And I was like, I looked at my opponent's board and it was like, okay, this is like 40 damage. Can I do something? Well, I couldn't. And I didn't even know that it has haste and vigilance. So the first time I actually played this card on Magic Online, I didn't even attack because I didn't know about it. So that's, you know, I would talk about power creep, but since I already talked for like 35 minutes already, I should keep it short. But the thing is, if you like look at my deck, then you can see that all these cards, and I'm also running out of space on hard drive. So give me a second. Okay, hopefully I'm still recording. Well, what I wanted to say is that if you look at this part of my deck, or well, actually all of it, then you'll see that majority of the cards are actually relatively new. I mean, for me, new is well anything which is post 8th edition, but in this case, I mean like post like well Battle for Zendikar, for example, because that's where the creatures really started to get really ridiculous. Um, even I mean from Shards of Aura, or actually rather a little bit later, like on Flux actually, where uh, we could play Mythic Bond, for example. Uh, the deck started to be like, like you just put all the value together and it kind of worked. And that is something I really didn't like, and it's also the reason why I didn't like Chant at first, and why I tried to ignore the deck for the whole season, even though I knew that it was the best deck. I just was like, okay, I'll try, like beating it. I tried for the whole season, and I didn't. So in the end, I just took Chant and went to the last um, qualifier for nationals, and I just easily won. And I was like, okay, so this deck is really, like the power level of the deck was, like really here, and all the on the rest of the decks were like, hey, here. And just okay, anyone could pilot that deck. Well, in the end, I found out that it's not really true because I played John for several years afterwards. That's also the reason why I can play 4C Blood, because otherwise I'd never touch the deck anyway. Um, and I saw that many people don't know how to play that because it was a card advantage deck, and many people didn't understand the card advantage. So this is not really the case of the deck here, you see. But jumped slowly with the band list, like with the Fried Shaman band and stuff, in modern. um, it started to become more and more good stuff. It started to become more like, well, let's say 4C Blood, and but this deck is way more interactive in a way. I mean, it's a fair deck, and every decision counts, and you need to think a lot about what you do. And well, even though the plan is relatively linear against different kind of decks, you'll figure that out. um, Sometimes you really need to think of really strange ways how to deal with something. That's the reason why I play really odd cards like Ageni Vengeance and Zealous Persecutions, because it helps me deal with situations I can't. There are some cards that create the real card advantage, like Religaments Command in Tireless Tracker, for example, in Primeval Titan and stuff. Um, but it's not what the deck is about. So that's 40 Blood. I don't really talk about lands, but what you need is a really solid mana base, and you can play a few utility lands, but they should actually do something really good. Otherwise, you shouldn't play that. For example, I play Carcass and Horizon Canopy. Sometimes I used to play in the slower decks. I used to play Covenant Township, for example, but this is not the deck you want to play that in. Well, but you want to play Manlands because you really need something against the slower decks. And well, the sideboard is also relatively straightforward. I mean, I just put there cards that I need in certain matchups. So in against creature decks, I need to have a way how to fight like White Vini, Red Deck wins, even though that matchup is actually good for me, but still I want to board some cards against it, so I win. There's more enchantment artifact removal, there's also graveyard removal because you need that. Winter Orb, I'm not going to play without that. The same goes to Teak, and Toxic Deluge is a card that I would even play main deck if I would find space for it, but room for it. But well, it ended up in my sideboard because I mostly just go through all the creatures and don't really care about it. So that's about the deck I played in the last Chainsaw Massacre, and I went 3-0, and then we took an additional draw with Lowman, and you can read about it in my Pure MTGO article. So go to puremtg.com or mtgotraders.com and look for Esung and, well, article talking about Foresee Blood. So thanks for watching, and well, see you next time.